The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, winner of the National Radio Hall of Fame Award, Michael Savage.
Whether the little mice are running across the wires. But I think all should be well today as it was yesterday. I know we had a little couple of glitches on Monday, and many people are upset. It's the number one top 5 trending stories on Facebook right now. I'm kind of surprised by it. I thought I was unknown. According to Wolf Blitzer and Jake Tapper and Fox News, Michael Savage doesn't exist. How is it, Blondie, on Fox News, and all of you other geniuses of the news business, that you block me, you ban me, you make believe I don't exist, and yet Michael Savage is one of the top trending stories on Facebook? How is it possible? And doesn't that mean that millennials, the people you keep looking for, are aware of me? Well, here's what we're going to talk about today. Not about me much. For the first time in his rotten, stinking career, Obama has been overridden for the first time. His veto was overridden by Congress for the first time in his rotten, stinking dictatorship. You don't know what a big thing this is to us. You have no idea what this is about yet. Well, maybe you do. I shouldn't say you don't know. Most people don't know what just happened to him. This is the most dramatic moment of Obama's career, and it's all free fall. And I'm going to talk about what happened. There was only one member of Congress who backed him. Only one. Did you hear this? Both parties overrode his veto. Only one stinking, rotten member of Congress supported Obama. Dirty Harry Reid of Nevada. It just shows you what a villain he is. If you were casting a villain for an old Western movie, and you wanted to show an old guy in somewhere in the Old West who stole land from widows, who had thieves running around robbing graves, there would be nobody better to cast than Harry Reid. He has that old Western look, doesn't he? That old reptilian look. He's a tough guy, don't kid yourself. But what a moron to do this. We're going to talk about what it was that was overridden by Congress. Both parties now. So put down your hatchets, all of you on the left, because you on the left and you on the right have joined together to override the monster in the White House. It's a huge story. Number 2, Trump triggers. I talked about it yesterday. Some of you heard it. What triggers were used by the psychologists who obviously, or I think, advised Hillary? There were triggers, and I told you which ones I think were used, like father, inheritance, things like that, triggered Trump into losing his balance during the debate. I'm convinced she was advised before the debate by the most manipulative psychologists in the world, probably some who work for the CIA or the FBI, and they told her exactly what trigger words to use, and she used them successfully. But now you're ready for the now we're loaded for bear. I've only been loaded for rabbit so far for the show. So far it's not that interested in the veto, not that interested in triggers. You're ready to hit the dial already. You're ready to search, but no. Here comes the heavy game now. It's coming right across your field of fire. The bison are coming right over the horizon. So get out your big guns, because here it comes. A panel in the United Nations says that the United States owes black people reparations for history of slavery. That's right. Here we go again. So we're going to talk about this rationally, not emotionally. I'm going to ask you today, I'll give you my opinion as I've done in the past, and I haven't changed one iota of my opinion. It's not changed at all. I'm the son of an immigrant. I don't owe anybody anything. Maybe you owe me something. Maybe the people who have been on welfare for their whole lives owe me reparations. Maybe those who were freed from slavery, their ancestors, owe some of the poor whites in the South who lost fathers and uncles and brothers to free the slaves. Maybe they're owed reparations by Oprah Winfrey. And by Barack Obama, for that matter. So we'll talk about that. I'll ask you, should black people in America be paid reparations? That's a huge topic. It's very important. I will also have for you, sometime during the show, we get it, my agent is waiting, biting his nails, week number 2 of the New York Times bestseller list. It was number 4, week 1, even though it outsold 2 and 3. I'll keep repeating it till you finally hear me. My book, my bestseller, my opus. That's right, Scorched Earth. Week 1, New York Times, they said was number 4 when it was actually number 2. But now we're going to get the report of last week, which is week 2. We're going to find out if we're still on the list. The phone number is here, 855-400-7282. 855-400-SAVAGE. I will open right now by talking about these topics, and I suppose the most interesting one to you is going to be the reparations. So I think the best thing to do is play the voice of the reptile from the United Nations. Her name is Muriel Fanon Mendez, the chairwoman of a United Nations working group for people of African descent. This is classic Pol Pot communism to drive a wedge between the races, cause a race war. But listen to her. This is what goes on at the UN. Hear it.
Contemporary police killings and the trauma it creates are reminiscent of the racial terror lynching of the past. Impunity for state violence has resulted in the current human rights crisis and must be addressed as a matter of urgency. Racial bias and disparities in the criminal justice system, mass incarceration, and the thought on crimes policy has disproportionately impacted African Americans. Mandatory minimum sentencing, disproportionate punishment of African Americans, including the death penalty, are of grave concern.
So this Nazi, this French Nazi, she's probably a combination of a Nazi and a communist all in one. She sounds like Madame Defarge. If there was an actual Madame Defarge from the Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, I would cast her voice. Her voice alone makes you want to strangle her to death. Nobody would do that, of course. But the voice, that slimy French voice, makes you hate all French. We're back already to not eating French fries. All I have to do is play this voice over and over again, and none of you will order French fries for the rest of the week. It'll be over. We don't hate the French anymore. Remember, we wouldn't eat French fries after 9/11 because of their despicable, cowardly behavior, and then we stopped it. We were eating freedom fries. After this speech, forget about it. You won't even eat brie anymore. But she says we owe African Americans because of all these things. State violence, disparities in the criminal justice system, which is a total crock of garbage, mass incarceration. You mean they put people in jail who didn't commit a crime? When did that happen? Tough on crime policies? That seems to keep criminals from committing their crimes, moron. Is disproportionately impacted African Americans? Why? Because apparently there's a disproportionate amount of crime being committed by that demographic group. What are you talking about, idiot? You know, this is the same garbage you see in a school with a teacher. Teachers are disproportionately picking on Latinos and Hispanic males. No, it's not because Hispanics and African males in classrooms tend to cause more trouble. No, it's because the evil racist teacher picks on them. See, this is the lie, the big lie. This is how the scum left works. So, my friends, the disproportionate use of the death penalty is another one she's citing, which is utter rubbish again. Because if you look back on the number of people who have been executed over the last number of years, it is not disproportionately African Americans who have been executed, by the way. So now let's go back to the slime bags at the United Nations, the evil slime communists, and I've said before, and I'll go on the record again, I've been on the record for 20 years, I have no power whatsoever. All I have is opinion. All I have is the power of opinion. That's all I have. If it was up to me, and it isn't, I would immediately shut down the United Nations. I would deport everybody in the UN back to their home. I'd give them 48 hours to get out of New York City. And I would turn the whole UN building on UN Plaza into a homeless shelter. And I'll tell you what, I'll split the baby with the bathwater. A homeless shelter only for African-American homeless. That's all. How's that? Does that work, Robert? Because I don't want to be disproportionately unfair. Throw everyone out of the UN, send them back where they came from, with their prostitutes and their drugs, and then open the UN up as a homeless shelter for people of color. Americans only. That's all. Would that work for you? Yeah, right. That's going to happen. So, yeah, once again, the reparations for slavery in the U.S. is in the news. Now I'll hear all the big-mouth liberals from New York. Yeah, we owe them reparations. All the Murrays running around the Bronx. Yeah, we owe them reparations because we've been bad. So, Murray, why don't you give up a dime of your pocket? Murray, give up your house, Murray. Murray, give up your condominium in Palm Beach, Murray. Murray, give a pair of shoes. But Murray isn't going to give up a pair of shoes. Murray won't put a nickel into the reparations. He wants you to pay for it. So, no, I'll talk about this. I'm not afraid to talk about it because I'm on the right side of history here. So let's talk about slavery in a macro sense. Can you name one nation in this world that has never had a people enslaved by another? Name one. We all know the Egyptians used Jewish slaves to build the pyramids. So that means what? I should hate Egyptians? I don't hate Egyptians. I never met an Egyptian I liked. Or didn't like, actually. I used the Lenny Bruce line. I never met an Egyptian I didn't like, because I never met an Egyptian that I know of. I did meet Egyptians. In fact, some of them, I do know them very well. I can name one. I know one Egyptian. How do you know someone's an Egyptian? They look like they're from the ancient world, like Mesopotamia, like they brewed beer in like 400. No, you can't name a nation that didn't enslave someone. Now, number two, did you know that the Mayans had slaves? Oh, yeah! Your poor oppressed Latinos of Mayan descent, their great-grandfathers or great-great-great-grandfathers kept slaves. Go watch one of the greatest films ever done in history by Mel Gibson, one of America's and the world's greatest filmmakers in the world, ever. That Apocalypto was the most astonishing movie I'd ever seen. Yeah, you'll see about slavery. That's the Mayans doing it to each other. Did you know Arabs had slaves? Oh, yes. Did you know Africans, since we're talking about the sensitive topic of Africans, did you know that in Africa, Africans enslaved other Africans? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If they found a weaker tribe, they put a hook in them and they made him into a slave. The Mongols took slaves. The early Europeans enslaved other Europeans. The American Indians enslaved other Indians that they captured. It's horrible. It's horrible. In the 20th century, the Japanese took slaves from China, Korea, and Mongolia until World War II ended those atrocities. Do you know what the Japanese did to the Koreans? Do you know what the Japanese did at Nanking, China? Do you know what the Japanese did to the Mongolians? Do you have any idea? Well, it's over. No one in China is demanding reparations from the Japanese. No one in Korea is demanding reparations from the Japanese, are they? Now, there is not a piece of land on this planet that is now a country that was the result of some sort of invasion, not a piece of land that was not some sort of invasion or conquest responsible for the creation of that land. And let me tell you something else. Slavery exists on the planet right now. This is the part that eats me alive. As we are talking esoterically about the injustice of slavery, and believe me, it's about as worse you can do to anybody is enslave them. It's nothing worse. Nothing. It scars people for many generations. Just take a look at what's going on in this country. People still walking around with resentment over something that didn't even happen to them. But let's put that aside. It's one of the worst things that could ever happen to anybody. There's no saying not. No question about it. However, I'm going to say this, and I hope you understand me. I know Jewish people, a lot of them, and I've run away from this type of Jew. The liberal Jews walk around with a chip on their shoulder about the Holocaust. And let me tell you why it's a mistake. The Holocaust in World War II was one of the most horrendous things ever done to other human beings. It was not just slavery, but it was torture and then murder and then the gassing of millions. How much worse can it get than that? It can't, right? But the Holocaust committed against, by the way, the Holocaust means fire, by fire. That's all it means. The Holocaust against the Jews, which was basically a burning of the Jewish people by the German Nazis in World War II, was horrendous, no question about it. But Jews should not define themselves by this event, this horrible event. Because by doing so, what you do is you're scarring yourself. You're ruining your whole mind. Judaism is not about the Holocaust. You shouldn't forget it. But Judaism is not about the Holocaust. It's about the Torah. It's about the Word of God. And when the Jew forgets that it's about the Word of God, he ceases to be a full Jew. He becomes a victim that marches around New York with an attitude a mile high. You get it? Take a look at Hillary's encampment. You'll find out what I'm talking about.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com.
Race has been a big issue in this campaign, and one of you is going to have to bridge a very wide and bitter gap. So how do you heal the divide?
Well, you're right.
All right, stop right there. This was another example of the creeping Marxism that is everywhere in our society as a result of the stealth Marxist regime that we have suffered under for the last 7.5 years. You say it's not connected? I'll prove it to you today. Now, I played for you the voice of a snake from the UN. Her name was Mireille Fanon-Mendez, France, calling for reparations for slavery by Americans for blacks. And I've addressed it in the opening of this show. Every instinct in me said this is classic Marxism, classic communism. She's trying to start a race war. This is what they do. This is how they operate. I looked her up because I had never heard of her. And sure enough, take a guess who she is. She's the daughter of one of the worst people in the history of the world, the Marxist so-called intellectual Frantz Fanon. So she's a hater. And let me explain something to you. The French Marxists are the most virulent, vicious in the world. France is a hotbed of insanity to begin with, on almost every level. But the insanity of Marxism, the locus of it, the locus of this infection is probably Paris. which is, by the way, why they're invaded by Islamists, because of the left wing in that country opened their borders up. Put that aside for the moment. So who is it? Anyone listening to this show who's read Scorched Earth and can instantly tell me, who is it that I quote or explain to you was a kindly constitutional scholar who was a leader of a people in Asia, went to France, studied Marxism, and came back and introduced what he had learned in France and created the Khmer Rouge, which resulted in a mountain of skulls, 3 million fellow Cambodians killed after a number of years. You don't have to look it up. It's in Scorched Earth. His name is Pol Pot. So this insanity, this hatred, which will lead to civil war and death, is being repeated again. Only it's not only coming from the UN, it's coming from the White House.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282.
So a reptilian Marxist at the United Nations gave an eerie speech saying that America is a racist nation, disproportionate sentencing, disproportionate incarceration, and that all Americans owe blacks money for reparations for slavery. Well, first of all, she's a lifetime Marxist. Marxism lives on revolution. Revolutions are caused by division. Division is caused by men like Obama and women like her. But let's just talk about reparations, because I think it's an important topic in that it came up today. It's almost a spin-off of the debate the other night, because Lester Holt had to throw in again the race thing. He had to do it in order to satisfy his bosses. And because without class warfare, without racial division, the Democrats are finished. Their entire party platform is built upon class warfare, economic warfare, and race warfare. They have nothing else to offer. But many of you agree with them. And I can't tell you how to think, but I'd like to hear how you think. Pat, WMAL, line 7, you're on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Real quick, first off, with regards to slavery, you are absolutely correct. Everybody on the planet has slavery. Most people enslave their own. The U.S., though, is special in this regard because they took a special trick, so to speak, and created, a special kind of slavery, whereas they weren't enslaving their own people. They went and grabbed a totally different ethnic group and brought them over. That became the lifeblood of the economy for this country, and it happened for a very long time. And
well, let's pause at your first statement, because I've heard it before. You mean every American benefited from slavery?
Every American lives within the after effects of that. Yes.
So you in your mind think that America owes blacks reparations. Who should pay them?
I'm not necessarily convinced that monetarily it needs to happen. I realize that it hasn't happened. I truly don't believe it's going to happen in your or my lifetime. And I think that's part of the reason, because we've gone too far. There's 46 million, I believe, African Americans. So it's not like everybody gets a certain amount of money. That's definitely not how we want to do it. So, but there needs to be a structure. I think probably, hopefully, behind the scenes, people are considering that.
You don't think affirmative action and disproportionate use of welfare is a form of reparations?
I think affirmative action.
How about all the white men who have not gotten jobs or appointments as a cop, fireman, teacher, because they had to hire blacks, even though it's illegal? Wouldn't you say that's a form of reparations?
Yeah, those are definite crimes. They are.
Well, you sound like an extremely rational man. You're a highly educated man. I can hear that. You're not just screaming and fuming, which is great. But, if you talk about something like reparations and you say, well, yeah, all blacks should be given reparations and all Americans owe it. I said, what, you mean even new immigrants owe reparations? So you're saying all the Mexicans who came here over the last 2 years owe reparations also?
You know what? The U.S. does have a history.
Should the Syrians who Obama's flooding in, the last 10,000, should they pay reparations to blacks?
The what, say again now?
Well, because you just said we're all benefiting from the work of slaves. That would include the Syrians that Obama just brought in. Do they owe your people reparations as well?
Well, no, not at all, not at all.
Well, not, but they're benefiting from the labor of your ancestors. So by your argument, even the Syrians that he's just brought in, even the Hondurans that are sneaking in with Zika that he's bringing in, they owe your people reparations according to your argument.
There definitely needs to be a and again, I'm not always speaking monetarily, so, it's not a matter, we're going to tax everybody. No, that's not All
right, so let's put the money off the table. So in what form of reparations are we talking about?
There are, there's access. There's, at least acknowledgement.
Wait, hold on now. Wait a minute. Access? You have an African American president. You have an African American head of DHS who's a complete idiot, who has failed us at every turn, and he's still the head of the DHS. There was another terror incident 2 weekends ago, and he still has his job. That's not a form of reparations, giving a guy like that a job, and he fails at it repeatedly. No one fires him.
Okay, you're referring to special cases. These people are the exception and not the rule. Okay, so it's not a situation.
All right, but who will pay the reparations? Where does it start? I'm the descendant of an immigrant to America. My father was an immigrant. We never received benefits of slavery. You would argue we all did because of the streets that were paved in New York or the buildings that were built by slaves, which is nonsense. But okay, you would argue the entire infrastructure of America is built upon the backs of slaves. I've heard that argument before. So who owes the reparations then in any form? Do people like me, first-generation American, you would probably say yes. Does a Mexican-American owe you reparations?
No, you're referring to individuals. You're talking individuals. I'm speaking to the government as a whole.
The government as a whole. So you wouldn't think the trillions of dollars that have been spent on welfare, which is disproportionately used, unfortunately, by people of color, is not a form of reparations?
I mean,
the whole program of the Great Society under LBJ was aimed specifically to redress the wrongs of the past and to help specifically the African Americans in America. That's exactly what LBJ set out to do with the Great Society. And you know what he did as a result? He enslaved the African people in America all over again. Before the 60s, there were tens of thousands of businesses in this nation, in communities, if you want to call them poor communities. Black people owned barbershops, you name it. As a result of the Great Society and the welfare state, the state replaced the father in the family, and as a result, you have a larger rate of women alone with babies now than you ever had before because they don't need a man around to get money. Come on, Pat, you could see what the welfare state does is imprison people. It's a form of enslavement, Pat. Okay, I don't think that we've changed our opinions on this, but I'm going to send you something. If you can name it, you gain it. What's the name of my best-selling book?
Oh, wow, really? I'm going to get scorched earth, huh?
You are an educated man. Hey, Pat, what do you do for a living?
Actually, emergency dispatcher for...
Good for you. I would hope to God if I ever fell in the streets, you'd be on the other side of the microphone. See? We don't have to hate each other in this country to disagree. I love it. This is what's called rational discourse. I haven't changed my position. Pat hasn't changed his position. But perhaps after this conversation, we'll both rethink our positions. You see, that's called civilization at its best. You get how good talk radio can be. It's so easy to sound like a tough guy and scream at everybody or hang up on them. That's an old shtick from the 90s. It doesn't work. This is what talk radio has to become. It has to become, I hate to use a liberal phrase, healing. The only way we're going to heal each other is by not letting the politicians get between us and each other. They will divide us as they have done from the beginning in order to conquer us all. Okay, so we're talking about that topic. Again, I want to go back to something else. Since we're talking about slavery, I would be remiss, and greatly so, to not tell you that as we speak, there are Christian girls screaming in the night. There are Yazidi girls crying in the night wishing somebody would kill them because they're being raped around the clock by the lowest vermin the world has seen since the Nazis in World War II. They are the Muslims in ISIS. They are taking slaves amongst minority groups in the Middle East, meaning Christian girls, Yazidi girls. They're passing them around to rape around the clock, raping them around the night. Sounds exciting to some of you sickos? Then go join ISIS. By the way, that's one of the greatest recruitment tools that these degenerates have, is the world's losers, men who can't get women in any society on earth, the worst scum on the planet. Arabs, they can't meet Arab women. They're the ones who join ISIS. They're not doing it for an ideal. They're doing it because they can get free women. Make no mistake about it. They're going there to rape young girls as young as 7 years old. So there's slavery going on right now, and it's not even being addressed by this same Fallon creature from the United Nations, this piece of human trash. She ought to go right back to France on an express. I'd send her back on a Concorde, even though there aren't any. That's why I'd say she should go back to France on a Concorde. All of those that are busted up in air museums. But again, I don't think I'm changing anyone's minds today. WMAL. Victor, you're on the radio.
All right, yeah, the point I'm making is, you know what, you're correct in a lot of ways, but one thing that we've been ignoring is the fact that what happened on this land for hundreds of years is not just about the slavery component or the economic component. It's about the breakdown and the stripping of our people of everything that they were to something totally different. And we're still feeling the residual effects of that process to this day. I don't care if we're on welfare or we're billionaires.
I agree with you. 100% right. The scars of slavery are probably forever.
And it was, like I said, it just wasn't slavery. It was like, okay, like the scene when Kunta decided, you know, they were trying to make him say Toby and your name is Toby. That was symbolism of what went on thousands and hundreds of
1,000% correct. 1,000% correct you are. But how do we compensate for that scar? What do? We open up the wound again and let it bleed?
No. First of all, we've never been properly taught. Both of us are victims, black and white. We've never been properly taught about what happened. I cried tears over the Holocaust as I'm 54 years old, as a 15-year-old in Mount Vernon High School library, looking at these loop films of these skeletal people in striped suits being loaded on the trains, and they showed the shower rooms where the gas came out, all that stuff. I literally shed tears in 1975 over that. But you know,
amazing.
I shed tears over that before I shed tears over what happened to my own. Not saying that they didn't deserve those tears. That was a very
I hear what you say. I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is interesting. You're saying as a child you were well schooled in the tragedy of the Jews conducted by the Nazis, but you actually had no such similar schooling as to your own people's indignities. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, not until 1977 with Roots. That was the first glimpse that...
All right, so you're making a very good point, but our president, okay, fine, I'll even make him my president today, just presided over the opening of the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. Isn't that sort of along the lines of the Holocaust Museum? Isn't that a big step along the way?
That's a big step in that way. I mean, and I said...
Well, but that's a $500 million museum, so school children can go through that museum and then continue to be angry and walk around angry at all white people. That's a very good thing to do.
No.
They're now train an entire generation to march around hating white people by marching them through the museum now.
No, they should not leave there hating white people. You should be able to leave that place. And because I've been studying this, like you've been studying holistic things and
yes,
herbs and all that stuff. I've been studying this for over 20 years. You shouldn't be angry at white people. You should just be saying, okay, I know you have a better knowledge of who you are. When you have proper knowledge of self, you don't turn to drugs. When you have knowledge of self...
Wow, no, you're good, man. You know what you're talking about. You're a you're a highly evolved human being, from my point of view. Who am I to tell you that? But you probably know that.
Yeah, well, it's only...
Well, what are you into religious-wise? Victor, what is your religious orientation?
I am a Muslim.
No, I sense that. I sense that you're a member of the Nation of Islam, correct?
Yes, I am.
Well, there's a benefit. If only the rabid mad dog who runs the Nation of Islam stopped hating people so much, it actually wouldn't be such a bad organization. But every time he opens his mouth, he says such things it's hard to believe.
You know what? I wouldn't follow a hater. And by the way, you can look at it on YouTube. The interview with him and
wait a minute. I have Louis Farrakhan's speeches. I don't have to go to YouTube.
The interview.
He calls Jews the worst things on the planet. He calls white people the devil. Victor, don't tell me you believe those things.
Listen to what I'm saying. Listen,
Victor, do you believe all white people are the devil?
White people are the devil. No, they're black.
Well, because Malcolm X believed all white people were the devil. You know that.
Well, that's part of the teaching that's misconstrued. You understand what I'm saying? We don't have enough time to make it really clear. Maybe
it wasn't misconstrued. He gave speeches saying the white people are devils, and the audience broke into cheers. There's nothing misconstrued. So then a lot of ignorant people without your brains or education walk around, and they see white people. They actually see a devil with blue eyes.
That's the point of...
So it makes it easy. See, here's the problem. What you're saying is true, but the reverse is true. When you start to demonize white people, or Hispanic people, or Asian people, what you're doing by dehumanizing them is getting yourself ready to hurt them without feeling anything for them. That's the problem with the dehumanization with others. We all know that. I don't want to sit here like a preacher, Victor. I think you've come to these conclusions on your own, and I'm going to send you the only thing I can give you right now, which is scorched earth. Don't let the Reverend Farrakhan see you bring it into that group. By the way, Victor, are you still there? Did Victor go? I want to talk to Victor. He's gone? Victor, are you there?
I'm still...
Victor, do you have a dog?
No, I don't. I love dogs, but my wife won't let me have one because she knows.
Okay, because I wanted to talk about that one day. I'm sending you a copy as well of Teddy and Me. Then you'll see who keeps me sound and sane. My little 10-pound... How can a 10-pound animal keep a man happy? Well, I'm not happy. Let's put it that way. I'm never happy. Rarely. Maybe after a big carbohydrate binge, I'm happy. Maybe a little TV binging, I'm happy. Maybe a bicycle ride, I'm happy. I'm not a happy guy. Radio makes me feel good, but that's not happiness. Happiness is for children. Happiness ends after your 3rd birthday. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. So a lot of people are talking still about the ramifications of the big debate, and I've done it. You know, the new polls and the this and the that, the jokes are going around, like when she said to him, when are you going to release your tax returns? Where are they, Donald Trump? He should have said, I emailed them to you. That's a good joke. Everyone likes that one. I mean, there are one-liners that are good after the fact. And then there's the issue of today Obama was overridden for the first time, his veto of a bipartisan bill. I didn't even get to it yet. Was overridden for the first time in his regime. His entire... 7.5 years, he's never been overridden on anything, ever. I mean, everybody voted against Obama today, except Harry Reid. Amazing. Should blacks be paid reparations? We are talking about that. And Scorched Earth Report coming up next.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage. Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, winner of the National Radio Hall of Fame Award, Michael Savage.
One of my favorite songs as a kid. I love Frankie Lyman. He loved Frankie Lyman. It shows he's not racist. I know how the left thinks. Whatever you say, they're already lining you up. They know more than you do about yourself. Most of them never got out of the starting gate, but they know everything about everybody. Meanwhile, another school shooting. I'm sitting here during the break. I'm looking at the yogurt I'm eating, Redwood Hill Farm Blueberry Goat Yogurt. I'm looking at the ingredients as I'm enjoying it. Grade A pasteurized whole goat milk, fruit, water, natural flavors, pectin, locust bean gum, citrus. And I'm looking at the screen on another school shooting, and I go back, like live active culture of S. thermopopalis, L. bulgaricus, L. acidophilus. I'm looking up 1 kill, 2 children, gluten, no refined sugar, gluten-free, kosher certified. And then again I'm looking up, and on the run, a teenager. I can't, it's like a schizophrenia here living in the news business. Again, you go back and forth. In the middle of this, Congress rejects Obama veto of 9/11 bill in the first override of his rotten, stinking presidency. Total fat 3.5 grams, saturated fat 2.5, trans fat. Trans fat? It comes from trans goats? There are tranny goats out there? I didn't know that. I always liked trans fats. Tranny fat? Oh, trans fats. Cholesterol 25 milligrams, sodium 65 milligrams, total Okay, so you see what I'm saying? This is the madness of the times we live in. And we're talking about reparations for slavery, which is like out of left field. You'd say, why all of a sudden is he doing this? 3 reasons. He's not good. 3 reasons. 1, because a left-wing fanatic, a pure, unadulterated, race-hating, America-hating Marxist, the daughter of Franz Fanon, which people are forced to study in colleges these days, vile Marxism from Franz Fanon has caused more deaths than you could imagine. Well, now his daughter, she's in the UN. Where else can she get a job? Either that or prostitution. And since in France there's no need for prostitution, since sex is everywhere, and nudism is everywhere, there's no need for prostitution in France. Everyone's a prostitute, according to the Muslims. Now, don't get mad at me. They're not wrong in some way. Marxist intellectual Franz Fanon joined the UN working group that recommended the United States should consider paying out reparations to the descendants of slaves. Chaired, as I said, by Mireille Fanon Mendez France. She says that we owe black people money. And she goes into a long... Well, why don't you listen to it? Because it's a big topic. Go ahead, play it.
There is a profound need to acknowledge that the transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity, and among the major sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and that Africans and people of African descent were victims of this act, continue to be victims of their consequences. Past injustice.
Hey, honey, go take a walk around Ferguson before you open your big trap. Honey, go take a walk in Chicago before you open your big mouth. You idiot, you. Watch out for the intellectuals. Let me explain something to you. You know, I played a song when I started the show, an hour or two, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And I was thinking about it. I'm in love with a lot of things. I love language. I love ideas. I have since I'm a child. But as I got older, I came to understand that everything begins with an idea. Everything in our life, everything in the world begins with an idea. Think about that. How powerful ideas can be. So when you hear a Marxist intellectual like this creature talking like this, you have to understand where this leads. It leads to racial warfare and civil war, which is exactly what she wants. This is the goal of all Marxists, which is to bring societies to their knees, to destroy them and rebuild them in the image of Karl Marx. So how best to do it than to turn blacks against whites and cause a race war? So that's why she's talking about it in the UN. So I want to talk about it today on the Savage Nation. I've touched on this topic before, and I'll say it again. I'll say over and over again why we do not owe anybody any reparations. Over and over again, I'll say it over and over again. There's a number of reasons. Trillions and trillions of dollars have been spent on welfare programs aimed specifically at minorities. Affirmative action policies, in essence, are reparations, where more qualified whites have been pushed aside so that people of color, and for that matter women, could be advanced. And what has been the result? I will argue, by the way, that big government has created a new form of slavery. Big government has created a graft system that you could never imagine. But worse than that is what effect this has on children. I remember what I said to you, is that everything begins with an idea. If you keep telling a child that he is a victim or she is a victim, the child grows up with a sense of entitlement and hatred, and they don't get anything from it. Their lives are ruined. And it occurs in all races across the spectrum. And I've given you an example of the Jewish people. And, this is something that most Jews don't understand, especially, right now this is an important topic because Friday night is the beginning of the Jewish New Year, for whatever it's worth. Our whole Western civilization is built upon, of course, the Greeks and the Romans. But the modern world, as we know it, has a great deal of debt to the so-called Judeo-Christian background of our society. Notice we don't hear that much anymore. Remember a few years ago, before Obama became the master-in-chief of rhetoric, you used to hear people get up and say, we are a Judeo-Christian nation. You don't hear that anymore, because now we're sort of an Islamo-Christian nation. That's even if you have allowed to say the word Christian at all. But nevertheless, going back to what I am getting at, in the Reform liberal Jewish community, as you go into your synagogues on Rosh Hashanah, many of you do, you're guilt-ridden Jews, you're lapsed Jews, you don't believe in God, most of you don't even know what it means. I'm not saying that I do, but I do. But you don't, and I know that for a fact. And you go there, you shuckle and you jive, and you give a few bucks to the synagogue, and you feel that you've absolved yourself until Passover. You throw a buck here and there, whatever. And you think that that's your religion. And if your decision is like a lapsed Catholic goes into church, when? When does a lapsed Catholic go into church? I don't know. Someone dies, someone's married, maybe a prayer for someone, a candle. That's about it. That's the religion today, mostly in America today. It's a state of, it's like a great edifice that's collapsed. The whole Judeo-Christian edifice in this country has collapsed, but for the fundamentalist Christians and for the Orthodox Jews, there'd be no Judeo-Christian images at all left in this country. Zero, be gone. But the social point is the one I want to make, and that is this. For a Jewish person to walk around thinking that the Holocaust that occurred in the 1940s, late 30s and the 40s, is the defining moment in Judaism is one of the greatest mistakes a Jew could make. Because it's not the defining moment in Judaism. It's moreover not the definition of being a Jew. And I've met Jews in my life, some of them very tough, very, very tough guys, who walk around with a chip on their shoulder over the Holocaust. Hating the whole world, hating goys, hating this one, hating that one. I know this is embarrassing for many people. You never hear this on radio. You don't even believe you're listening to this, many of you. You can't believe you're hearing it on the radio for the first time. But I have a natural way of expressing myself that is not offensive, I hope. No, I don't do it to be offensive. I'm talking to you, to the audience, as I would talk to a person. A lot of these guys walk around with a really bad attitude about the world, and they justify. Listen to what I'm getting at. Picture someone in the movie business. Picture a brusque kind of guy. I can give you a name, but I won't because I'll get sued. Picture one of the most famous, or amongst the most famous guys in Hollywood of this type. Brutal to everyone, rips everyone off. In his mind, he justifies it because of the Holocaust. You don't know that's true. You don't know. What I'm telling you is 1,000% true. You don't know how people use these horrible things that have happened in the past and didn't even touch them to justify their own criminality. I do. But the same scarring occurs amongst other races as well. So for blacks to walk around saying, because of slavery, I have a right to reparations, or I have a right to beat you up, or I have a right to this, or right to that, is the same kind of illness that I am trying to alert you to when you get into the reparations talk. Be very careful, because it turns you not into a better person, but into a bitter person. And it's not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to get anything. You'll never get reparations in your lifetime, ever. First of all, even if you could, let's say, convince Congress to do it, which will never happen, who pays the reparations and who gets them? Does Oprah Winfrey get reparations? Does a baseball player like Kaepernick, Pimpleneck, whatever his name is, the American-hating knee job, he gets reparations? He makes $100 million a year. We owe him reparations? No, not him. So what, you're going to cut it off over anyone who makes more than a certain amount? They don't get reparations, or they do? Or they get it too? Then they give it to whoever they want? Well, who pays them? Every American should pay reparations for what was done to the slaves. Every American? Okay, does that include the latest round of immigrants pouring across the border? No, they don't have to pay reparations because they're good. They didn't benefit from slavery. Oh, okay, so who does? Well, only those who directly benefit from slavery. All Americans do. Well, you just said the whole infrastructure, some of you argue, that we all live upon. Everything in this country was built on slavery. So therefore, by your mind, everyone owes you something. So that would include the 10,000 Syrians that Obama just brought in. That would include the 15-year-old Guatemalan or Honduran who has Zika, who Obama just brought in in a boxcar in order to have another voter for Hillary. She should pay reparations too? They say, well, not her, not the Syrians. Well, who then? The Mexicans who were here illegally, they should pay? No, because they didn't benefit from it. How about the Mexicans who've been here longer than most white people, like for 200 years? Did they pay? Yeah, they pay. Well, so now you're going to do a cutoff now? Who pays? How much is there paid? To who? To every black? No, because some are descendants of men who owned slaves themselves. Oh, well, they wouldn't get it either. So you see, it becomes unmanageable. You can't do this. You can talk about it all you want, and it's not going to happen. And that's the end of the story. Well, it's the beginning of the story. But I've touched on this before. I would like to run clip 1 from 2007 just to show you I wasn't born yesterday. Here I am on this very same issue back in 2007. I hope I'm not embarrassed because I haven't reviewed it. Go ahead, Robert. Fire away and get ready to kill it. Let me ask you something. How many white men died freeing the slaves? I'd give them reparations. You know what? I'd give them reparations. They've already had reparations. You want any of the reparations African Americans have had already? How many white men died? 400,000 to 600,000. That's the answer. And they died to free the slaves. Now, how many millions of dollars or trillions of dollars were spent on welfare? And what has that done for society? Nothing. And how many blacks got jobs they didn't deserve simply because of their skin color? Why don't you just do it on your own? How about that for reparations? Wait a minute. Oprah Winfrey needs reparations. Bill Cosby needs reparations. The NFL needs reparations. What are you talking about? Who's the money going to come from? Tell me which Americans pay for it. Everybody owes the blacks something. Is that it? That's it. 2007. I was fiery then. That was 9 years ago. I guess I've slowed down. I don't think I've slowed down. I've just gotten smarter. I'm like Babe Ruth now. In those days, I'd have to run around the bases a lot faster. Now I just knock it out of the park and walk around the bases.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. It is, what a show. It's flying by again, because I'm not talking about the boring debates. I can't take it. You can take more of it. Get it over with already. I mean, this reparations is a big story in that it came up at the UN from a Marxist who wants to start a race war. And number 2, because Obama opened the African American Museum over the weekend, which is an important milestone for America. And, of course, he said nothing over the weekend about another Muslim terror attack in Seattle. Nothing, not one word enters his mind about what Muslims are doing around the world. Not one word. Again, he keeps us focused on something else. But I want to ask a Native American what he thinks. That's an interesting question. You want to talk about reparations? Why don't we begin with the Native Americans who had the entire country robbed from them? How about that? Mato on line 9. Go ahead, please. You're on the Savage Nation.
Dr. Savage, I really want to check these African American in their history. There's this term called the Buffalo Soldiers. When they sent, let's back up a little bit. And when they were the Underground Railroads and during the Civil War, when they were freeing the slaves, where do you think they took those slaves? They took them to the Native people because they knew that we would protect them because we understood what they were going through. As soon as the war was over and they created the Buffalo Soldiers and stuff like that, they came and raped our women. They killed us. They enslaved us. And they
wait. Who came? The black people who had been put with you that you took care of?
Yes.
They came back and did that to your people?
Yes, sir. The Buffalo Soldiers. Dude, let me read their history. The Buffalo.
Oh, I didn't know that. Morgan Freeman didn't teach me that.
No,
he's an expert. Oh, Morgan Freeman's an expert on God, on art, on science, poetry. He didn't teach me that part of history. I didn't see that one, Mato.
Oh yeah. But see, they don't want to hear that, and they talk about the genocide and oh yeah, they came to other countries to take the black people to bring them over here.
Now I understand. First of all, I'm so happy to have an affiliate in South Dakota. It's thrilling to me on KIMM. Do I have an audience there amongst Native people?
Oh yeah, you do. Yeah, a lot of it is not to do with. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but me, I'm probably one of the most conservative, radical natives in the country.
Oh man! And I got to go. First of all, I'm sending you scorched earth. I wish I had a copy of Earth Medicine because it's all about your ancestors. I spent years. I need to talk with you because I watched the movie The Revenant last night on television, and I'll tell you the truth, it reignited in me my rage of what was done to the Native American. It got me furious. It got me sick to see how they were treated by the settlers. I mean, they were really brutalized. So if you want to talk about reparations, I know a lot of people wash it away. They say, oh, they got the casinos now. I've heard that. But you talk about having your culture stripped from you. It does not get much worse than what was done to the Native Americans in the white schools here when they weren't allowed to speak their own languages. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir. I have a story about my father.
Hold on. I want to hear it. I love it. It's radio on the Savage Nation.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
I never knew that about the Buffalo Soldiers. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We were talking about the UN demanding that the U.S. pay blacks reparations. And we've gone back and forth. I've given my position, and others have given theirs. And I know many are waiting to talk in terms of what they think. And a gentleman calls from South Dakota on KIMM radio, Mato, who is a Lakota. When I say Lakota, I don't want to be, misrepresenting the affiliation, the tribal affiliation. Is Lakota related to the Sioux Indians?
Yes, the Sioux is a French term. It was pardon the pronunciation, but it's a partial word for like Sudessawan, I believe, and it's a French word, and it's a serpent, and that's what the French referred to us as. They referred to us as we were lower than snakes.
Oh God! Oh my God! Leave it to the French. All right, so you're a Lakota native, and you started by saying the blacks who are demanding reparations ought to pay us reparations, and you brought up the example of the Buffalo Soldiers, who you say were who? They were black people who were freed, brought to the reservations to be cared for by your ancestors, and then what happened?
Well, when they were being freed from slavery and they were escaping their slave owners and stuff. They would come to the Native people because they knew they would take care of us, and then when they became, some of them became Buffalo Soldiers and stuff like that, and they were sent to basically watch over us and babysit us and killed us. A lot of them, they raped our women and stole from us and did exactly what they're crying around about, and we're not asking them for reparations. And I'll tell you, you asked the question earlier about what was done. This is something that happened. My father, he passed away last year at 86 years old, and in his lifetime, he was telling us stories about when he was they would take him away and put him into Catholic mission schools and would beat them. They would physically beat them for not speaking the English language and not acknowledging their American English names. And he had his back broken. And when he joined the Army, he came back one time with the idea that he was going to kill one of these Catholic priests on this mission that would beat him. And when he got back, the guy was so old and so frail that he said, "You know what? You're suffering enough. You don't need me to kill you." And that was compassion. And that was the thing that he taught us, was compassion. He did a DVD which I'd like to send you. It's called The 7 Rights of the Lakota.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, not only do I want to have it, there's a lot more that you and I have to talk about. So, Mato, a couple of questions, because this is now we're going to go into other areas. Do you live on a reservation, so to speak?
I do not. I live off the reservation. A lot of my family, my in-laws, we all reservation. We were raised on a reservation, but
I left the reservation too. I left New York about 40 years ago. I got out of that reservation.
I'm probably one of the few that don't think, it's like we've gotten everything that we really have coming to us, if we have anything coming to us. I've got an education. I went to the service. I've done all these things, and I have a job. And the people that don't.
So you don't walk around. You don't walk around with the scars of the enslavement, the robbery of your ancestral land, the total humiliation of your identity as the young African who said earlier, the loss of identity. I know it was done to the native. I have a side question because I'm curious about it at this stage of my life. This is a weird one. How do the Lakota bury the dead?
In the ground. We have a wake. It's 3 days where everybody's viewing and stuff like that, and then we bury in the ground. I mean, we believe in the Unchimaka, which is Mother Earth, that we come from Earth and we go back to the Earth. When we bury our dead, we don't bury them. We only bury them in wooden caskets, because everything that has to go back to the Earth. So we don't want anything like metal or anything like that, because.
Do you know that the Orthodox Jews have the exact same theory? They use plain pine caskets because they believe in the same exact thing. But let me ask you something else. What about images that I've seen of Native Americans using funeral pyres? Is that an ancient ritual that's been forgotten? Because what you're describing is basically a Christian burial, isn't it?
It is, and yes, it is. Now, and that was brought to us, and I know that we buried our dead long before that. But yes, we do use burial fires, but we don't burn the dead. When we have, during the wake and during the ceremony of a funeral, we have a fire that stays burning for the whole time.
So asking something else, Majo, about your people, in your own discussions, in your own tribal lore, how many years have your people been on this continent?
That from the stories that I've been handed down, it's been a couple thousand years now. There's some stories, and like I said, I don't buy off on all of it because I don't know, but there's some of our older traditional Lakota. And in this DVD, The 7 Rights of the Lakota, explains that some of our ancestors believe that we actually came from another planet called Pleiades.
There's a lot of Christian sects who believe that. There are Muslim sects who basically function in that same world of another world. And who knows who came from another world? Who knows how many amongst us are from another world? It almost doesn't matter. What matters is how we get through this horrible madness called our life. What are the guideposts that you guys use to carry you through every day? What do you use to keep you on that field? What do you use to keep you from using the drugs and the alcohol? What keeps you going?
I believe in the chanupa, which is the pipe. Some people call it the peace pipe, but it's not a peace pipe. It doesn't have anything to do with war and everything. As a matter of fact, we come from the Tajik pole, which is the Sans Art band, which was the ones that the pipe came to back at the White Buffalo calf woman. And but the Sans Art Tajik pole means those without bows, because when the pipe came to us, they were said that you can't have weapons in the pipe because the pipe is the most strongest weapon of all, prayer.
What are you smoking? A tobacco?
It's called chinchasha, and it's we use the bark of a red willow tree, which is only harvested after the first frost in December, and it's shaven down and we mix it. Some people use it just plain chinchacha, and some others use we'll mix it with natural tobacco. I personally don't.
Well, the willow tree has natural salicylates in it. It has natural salicylic acid, as a matter of fact. It's the progenitor of aspirin in the willow bark. That I know from my years of studying herbal medicine. So by smoking the young willow bark, when the levels of salicin are the highest, you're actually getting a calmness from it. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and we don't inhale it. That's the big thing.
Well, it's absorbed probably through the mucosa anyway. You don't even have to inhale it to get the benefits. But that's well, we could go on for hours. I could spend time up with your people, believe me, hanging out and talking. And before we go, do you have a library on that reservation? Do you have a library anywhere on the native reservation, Lakota reservation in your area?
Absolutely.
Did you ever come upon any of my earlier books, including Earth Medicine from 1972? Was that ever held up by Native Americans as a useful book?
I have that book.
Well, I'm telling you, this is more than meets the eye here on the radio, Manto, and you and I are like kind of ancient souls that banged into each other here on the show. I'm going to send you Scorched Earth to finish the cycle of Earth Medicine to Scorched Earth. It may be the last book I write or publish. I don't know. That's only up to the, putting in the other terms, it's really not up to me. It's up to some greater spirit in the sky what comes next. But I'm going to ask the guys, email, blah, 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 and I'll give you mine. They'll give you and you'll send me that, and we're going to start the conversation going. I would ask you, do you ever come down to San Francisco, but I doubt it.
I tried not to, but...
Well, if you come to San Francisco, don't come with a flower in your hair. Come with willow bark in your pocket. All right, my friend, this is great. I mean, it's a distraction in a way, but it isn't. It's what makes radio great. And maybe once every few years, you get a call like this. I can't count how many times, in the years I've done radio, I've had calls which transcend the normal radio. I had it once with a rabbi who I still think was a voice of God. I don't remember him. We once tried to reach him again. He was not reachable. And we were talking about time and how can you believe in God and believe in science at the same time. Well, this guy called and he sounded like an ordinary voice from New York. And he explained very quietly that, yes, you can believe in science and evolution and God at the same time. And I said, how? I said, how could, if the Bible says that God created the world in 6 days and on the seventh day he rested, how could that be? And in the Bible's, only 5. He said, because to God, a day could be 1,000,000 years in God time. In other words, a day doesn't mean a day. A day to them could have been 1,000,000 years. You see what I'm saying? That explains the whole evolutionary theory and believing in God. That's what he said. So I thought about that. I said, I don't know who listens to a radio show with a mass audience. It's mass communications. You have every kind imaginable. Why couldn't it be that an emissary of God listens to talk radio? Maybe he's bored of television. Maybe he can only take so much of the movies. I don't know. He's hanging out. He's trying to do something while he's down here. He's got to do something with his time if he's in a humanoid form. So maybe he listens to talk radio. That's never know. Okay, so Mato from South Dakota, you're going to get his stuff. We're going to share email, and we're going to talk and do this and do that. It's good. It's a weird day for me. I was up all night Monday because of what happened technically to the show. I couldn't sleep, heart pounding, palpitations, really upset. Last night, I got a hacker and a virus went into all my computers. This is a shocker. So I was up all night, half the night last night, 2 in a row now. And if I ever tell you what I had to do, the screen turned yellow and call this number, and it's a Microsoft assist line. It turns out it wasn't. But a guy sounded, he was Indian. They're so good, the hackers. Don't ever call those lines. Call 800 and speak. So the guy answers, they'll tell us your name and put your finger on C and an R. I didn't know what I was doing. The minute I did that, he could get into my computer. I'm not that knowledgeable. So he gave me a whole spiel about the computer was invaded by a virus. You have no idea how infected your systems are. I said, I don't know. What do you mean? What do you want me to do here? Because I couldn't get into my computer. So he says, well, we're going to put a protection in for you. Take a look at your screen, he says. You have 3 choices. One was McAfee, the other. And he said, how do you want to pay? I said, wait a minute. What do you mean, how do I want to pay? He said, credit card. I'm not giving you a credit card number. As cynical as I was, he took me that far. He said, how about a check? I said, no. I said, wait until the employees come in the morning and we'll deal with it then. Well, anyway, my computers were blocked. So I have people working right now to change everything. Routers, computers. I called my attorney, Dan, who said it was clearly a hacking situation. And I guess on those, I didn't have my number 1 advertiser. I should have. How can I not have my advertiser on those computers, only on the work computers? I forgot to put him on my own computers. Who's my number one guy on that, Robert? You know who it is. I read the ad this morning. Come on, guys, your life is up in the air right now. That's right, LifeLock. LifeLock does it. I should have had him on my home computers. I didn't. So, yeah, I got hacked. I didn't sleep another night. But it's not so bad. I remember years ago, I'm going to go now into another thing, because I told you it's free associational, which is the mark of a great mind. LifeLock, free associational. Remember I said to you sometimes along the way of life, you get into a side thing in your life, and that becomes a whole story. And then in that side thing that you're doing, other side things occur, and you go down those roads. Then those side things lead to side things, which lead to other things. And sometimes they lead you to the true path. That's what I'm trying to explain to you about conversation. It doesn't have to be didactically a single dimension. It can be multidimensional, and you can go off in different directions and lead you back to the main path, the main road, the main river, leading you into the sea of knowledge. That's what I'm trying to say to you. And it's happened to me in my life numerous times. And so what I was getting at is, years ago, I remember I had insomnia when I was young, and affirmative action had stolen my manhood from me. When affirmative action introduced by the communists said to me, some people will have to put their lives on hold so others can get ahead. I couldn't sleep. I was up night after night. I had 2 young children. I couldn't make a living. I killed myself working 3 jobs. I tried to get a teaching job. They wouldn't hire me because I was a white male, even though I had straight A's in grad school. I had written 6 books at the time. They said drop dead, basically, and laughed at me. So I stayed awake, not wanting vengeance. I didn't know what had happened to me. But then I read some books on self-help, and one of them said that we don't need the amount of sleep we think we need. That insomnia is actually not a bad thing. Because think of the things you can do during the night that you normally don't do. And they wrote it out like, you can look at the stars and learn star formations. You can write a novel. You can do this. You can do that. And they said more people die. I remember the book to this day. I'm going to take a break in a minute. More people die from fearing a lack of sleep than from the lack of sleep itself. And that saved me. Like knowledge saves you. Now, you ask any man in the military if he really needs the sleep that he needed when he was back home and in his house, wherever it is in America. He didn't need it. Those guys can go days without sleeping when they're jacked up. Okay, then eventually you catch up. But it's like you need 3 meals a day? No, but we eat them. Now, take a look in the mirror, see what it does to you. I got to stop. I'm in one of these loquacious moods. You'll have to forgive me.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. Obama veto overridden for the first time. Trump triggers, should blacks be paid reparations? Mall shooter, remember him? You forgot him already? The one who executed 5 women in Macy's outside Seattle? Well, guess what? The head of DHS still has his job. That's right. He also had a blog with links to posts of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei. In Scorched Earth, it opens with a statement. Roman civilization did not pass peacefully away. It was assassinated. Your civilization, your society, your way of life is being assassinated on a daily basis by this administration. It will be destroyed completely by Hillary Clinton. Read all about it in the one book you need, Scorched Earth.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage. Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, winner of the National Radio Hall of Fame Award, Michael Savage.
It's all about conquest. Every nation on earth has faced conquerors, and either they repel the conquerors or they're conquered and they are no longer the nation. That occurred to the Native Americans when they were conquered and converted. It occurred across the globe, conquest and conversion. Right now we are being conquered not only from the south but by the Middle East, and as a result of the crypto-Muslim president that we have. How's that for use of a phrase? I know, he's American, he's Christian. Fine, he's a crypto-Muslim. His sympathies are Islamic. He never says Islamic terrorism. He doesn't follow up on Islamic terrorism. He appoints the head of a DHS who will not mention Islamic terrorism, let alone find the perpetrators. And here's another one to show you how corrupt this government is. And remember how I opened Scorched Earth. Please remember the quote, Roman civilization did not pass peacefully away. It was assassinated. This nation is being assassinated by this left-wing fanatical administration. Here's an example. Came out today. Headline, Judge sides with company accused of discriminating against Muslim workers. Immediately I knew what the story was about. A judge has ruled in favor of a meat company accused of mistreatment of Somali Muslim workers. I know what this is. Now take a guess who filed a lawsuit against this American meat company. 2010, the Federal Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, which is a fascist organization, filed a lawsuit against this meat company on behalf of 80 Somali Muslims. What was the complaint? They come from a hellhole in Africa, a destitute hellhole that a rat wouldn't want to live in. They're given every opportunity in America, and the first thing they do is learn how to sue. What did the 80 Somali Muslims suffer so much? Well, according to the Federal Equal Opportunity Employment Nazi Commission, Obama's hit squad sued the company saying that the meat company failed to make reasonable religious accommodations at its Grand Island plant, violating the workers' civil rights since at least 2007. Now take a guess what it is that these ungrateful Somali Muslims wanted. You want to hear what they wanted? They wanted to pray 6 times a day on company time. Now, if you understand what this is all about and see all the ramifications of it, you know what I mean by Roman civilization did not pass peacefully away. It was assassinated. Obama is assassinating this nation. Make no mistake about it. She said, what does it have to do with tomorrow? Hillary will make it worse. She has said she will continue his policies. She said she'll bring in 550% more Muslim refugees, just to show you how smart she is. Now, I don't care if you're a Native American, I don't care if you're a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu. What sane nation on earth brings in people amongst whom there is a high percentage of terrorists? Explain that to me. Would India import Muslims after the wars they've been through between Hindus and Muslims? No. Would Russia bring in Muslims, given what has happened in that country? No. Does China import Muslims? No. Japan? No. Korea? No. Can you name one country on earth that would bring in Muslims in a time of Muslim terror worldwide, except the United States of America? Why is he doing it? Not because he's fair-minded. That's bull. That's a cover. That's a cover story. That's how he sells it to the weak-brained liberals in this country. The children raised on sugar and bad wine and medication go for the lie that it's Muslim discrimination to not let them pray 6 times a day on company time. It's rubbish. Okay, so nevertheless, here's one example amongst many of how this nation is being destroyed, and if Hillary wins, it will be finished. Scorched Earth, Restoring the Country After Obama, it's a must-read. Many of you know that. We're waiting, by the way, in this hour. I don't think I'm going to get it. I was waiting for week number 2, the report. I'll have it tomorrow of the New York Times list for week 2. It's a big deal. It's like a movie opening. Everyone in the movie business wants to know how the movie did, right? Well, those of us who write books want the same thing. Okay, so now we're talking about reparations. That's come up because a Marxist at the UN is screaming that we owe blacks reparations. So we've been talking about it. I've had some very intelligent callers, by the way. I can't even summarize how good they were. I don't think we went away changing our opinions. 2 black gentlemen who disagree with me, but they were reasonable and they presented their arguments well. And I didn't change my position for all the reasons I have given you, which I could repeat if you want, but I don't think I have to. But I could actually repeat some of them if you want to talk about reparations to African Americans. First of all, there's no single group responsible for the crime of slavery. There is no one group that benefited directly or exclusively from slavery. How about white Americans who are immigrants themselves or whose father was an immigrant? Do I owe reparations? How about the fact that all African American descendants of slaves continuously suffer from the economic consequences of slavery and discrimination? Would that include Barack Obama? You mean if he had not been a descendant of an African? By the way, his father was of African heritage. He was never even of African American heritage. By the way, separate the two, by the way. But let's take another example of an African American whose ancestors were in fact enslaved, who are now, let's say, billionaires. Do they need the reparations? What about the fact that reparations have already been paid in the form of trillions of dollars in welfare aimed specifically at poor people, especially poor minorities, because it was largely expanded by LBJ, who targeted helping the African-American communities, not because he was a good man. You should hear what the things he said about blacks behind the scene and against Jews. He said that he did it strictly to own black people for 100 years. He said that. He said that if I give them welfare, we'll own them for 100 years. Now, what do you think that was, if not a form of reparations? But what about all the white men out there who wanted to be a teacher or a doctor into a good medical school, or a cop or a fireman, who had the highest qualifications, who were pushed aside for a minority, a black, an Hispanic, whatever the number is? What is that? Is that not a form of racism? Is that not a form of reparations on the other side? Of course it is. That's all these things have to be talked about. Secondly, it's politically unworkable. It'll never happen. The only reason we're hearing about it now is because the UN and this Marxist working group is run by this woman, Mireille Fanon Mendez France, is the daughter of the horrible, monstrous Marxist intellectual Frantz Fanon, who is very well known amongst the brainwashed millennials because they've been forced to study this monster's writings. And so they come out brainwashed thinking that they should have white guilt. They have no idea what they are doing to themselves. So why do Marxists in this country and elsewhere want blacks to have resentment, greater resentment than they already may have? Because this way they can steam up a war, a civil war, a race war. And it could get worse than it's already gotten under Obama. Obama's running on that same scenario, by the way, because he is a stealth Marxist, if not an outright one behind the scenes. I mean, what he's practicing, you don't have to tell me what he is. I know what he is. All of his bills are either Islamic in nature. Look at what just happened to him today. Do you know what happened? It was a land mile of embarrassment in his entire career. The entire Congress overrode his veto. The whole Congress, Democrats, Schumer, liberals, all of them except one, Harry Reid, voted with the president, of the only one. Why? Well, he's a villain. It's a villainous thing what Harry Reid did. So Obama was overridden, but the big question is, why did he even support this? Why? In other words, what was Obama doing? Families for years have tried to sue Saudi Arabia for the terror attacks of 9/11. It took them 10 years or more to reach this point, and both Democrats and Republicans said they have a right to sue the Saudis because the majority of the hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. So you say it's a no-brainer, the president shouldn't afford it. Now, why would the president surrender to the Saudis? Why would Obama surrender to the Saudi Arabian government and embarrass himself like this, leaving a terrible mark on his legacy to do a thing like this? And by the way, showing him for what he really is. Why would he do it? Well, look back on the pictures of George Bush having his head patted by the Saudi king. Bush bent over and had the head patted. You don't remember that? So the Saudis probably control this country to a far greater extent than we could ever believe. And that is why Obama has fought the Keystone XL pipeline, incidentally. Because this nation is already almost energy independent. And if Trump becomes president, incidentally, we will be drilling, we'll be pumping, we'll be fracking. Not only will we be energy independent and exporting energy around the world, but the Saudis will be pounding sand. They'll go back to what they were before the 1950s. They'll be pounding sand if we ever get Trump as president. So now the answer is right there. That's why he fought Congress on this. Why was his veto of this ability to sue the Saudis overridden for the first time? Why? Because everyone knew it was the right thing to do, to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for the terrorism. You understand this? So those are some of the things we're talking about. Obama overruled. I told you that's the big story. State-sponsored terror lawsuits approved. Only one senator supported Obama, and that's Harry Reid. Congress votes to override Obama veto on 9/11 victims bill. This is the greatest shame of his entire political career. Not only because he lost, but because he's shown up for what he is, a puppet of the Saudi government. A puppet. An overwhelming majority, says the New York Times. Are you kidding me? What do you mean overwhelming majority? The whole Congress did. The whole Congress stood up to Obama. But there was stooges who stood up with him. Stooges like Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, who is, in my opinion, one of the most shameful people in that job ever seen. He's the one who brought transgender issues to the military like they're more important than defeating ISIS, and you wonder why we can't defeat ISIS. The whole operation is given over to things like that instead of defeating the enemy. You hear a defense secretary spending all this time on those issues? It's not to knock trans. People are that way, they're that way. Good luck to them if that's what they like. They're not hurting me. I'm not threatened by it. They're having fun. God bless them. But that doesn't mean you take the whole society and turn it on its head upside down. See, there's a difference in I want to talk about that issue for a minute. I've never really addressed it properly, because last hour we were talking about reparations, and a Native American from the Lakota tribe talked about how his people were abused by Africans who were they had taken in as during the Civil War, runaway slaves, and then they became Buffalo Soldiers, and then the soldiers came back and really hurt the Lakota tribe. And we never knew anything about it, because I guess Morgan Freeman didn't teach us that. He's busy teaching how God is, because he knows everything, Morgan Freeman. So I didn't know that about the Buffalo Soldiers, and it's important for us to know as much as we can about everything to make an informed decision, isn't it? So now we're talking about what? We're talking about suing the Saudi Arabians. We're talking about how everyone in Congress except Harry Reid voted for it. Everyone, both liberals and conservatives, said yes, sue them. They deserve it. And here Congress stands up to Obama, overrides his veto on the 9/11 victims bill. Obama now looks like what he actually is, a shameful puppet of a foreign power. And they would have you believe Donald Trump is the enemy. Right? But the fact is this was long overdue. Saudi Arabia had no immunity from American lawsuits, because this measure amends a 1976 law that granted other countries broad immunity from American lawsuits. So now they can be sued. You hear? For several weeks this summer, by the way, a handful of Republican senators blocked this very bill as they worked behind the scenes to soften its impact on Saudi Arabia. Did you know that? Did you know that the Republicans were also doing this, the turncoats? Then earlier this month, you can read it yourself, it's too complicated. But this bill and what happened today will make Americans, maybe some educated Americans, re-examine Obama's alliance with Saudi Arabia. In fact, for the entire government's alliance with Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, for decades has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy in the Middle East. So people now have to think about what this really means. You see? Shortly before this vote to override, Senator Mitch McConnell, he's the one with the gullet who looks like a turkey, the majority leader, fast-tracked the vote on a measure that sought to block the sale of some tanks to Saudi Arabia, and it failed. It failed. He couldn't block the sale of tanks to the kingdom. And that signaled to Saudi Arabia that Congress had not turned its back on the nation. You hear this? Okay, this is a very big story, but I know the one that's emotional, the one you want to talk about is reparations. We have people holding for a long time. We're going to get to them the minute I return in the Savage Nation.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com. I have a little good news to announce for breaking news. I just got it a minute ago. Your book, Scorched Earth, is number 6 for week 2 on the New York Times hardcover bestsellers list, as well as number 6 on the combined print and ebook list. Now, this is a huge deal. Remember I told you for week 1 it was number 4, even though it outsold numbers 2 and 3. So that means Scorched Earth was number 2. So now they're saying it's number 6, which means it's probably number 4. Now you'll say, well, oh great, it slipped down. Say what you want. All I can say to you is now for 2 weeks in a row, the world sees on the list, the world of the reader, it says Scorched Earth, Restoring the Country After Maobama is how they put it up there, by the way, M-A-O, Bama, because I coined that phrase, no matter how many people have used it since. I coined it. Restoring the Country After Maobama. So my message now is sent out, basically around the world. And your billboard is your book. And it means you're not alone in knowing what he's doing to this country and what Hillary will do to finish us off. Because make no mistake about it, if she ever sees this book, I have to flee the country. Because this administration has done such damage, but they haven't finished the job yet. If she wins, she's even signaled what she will do. She said she will bring in 550% more Muslim refugees. It's in Scorched Earth. It's a must book for everyone who doesn't know what she's going to do. The debates were important, but nobody saw the real Hillary because the stooge, I forgot his name wrong, Lester Dolt, didn't ask her the real questions. Okay? You have the answers in Scorched Earth.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
A panel in the United Nations says that the United States owes black people reparations for history of slavery. That's right. Here we go again. So we're going to talk about this rationally, not emotionally. I'm going to ask you today, I'll give you my opinion as I've done in the past, and I haven't changed one iota of my opinion. It's not changed at all. I'm the son of an immigrant. I don't owe anybody anything. Maybe you owe me something. Maybe the people who have been on welfare for their whole lives owe me reparations. Maybe those who were freed from slavery, their ancestors, owe some of the poor whites in the South who lost fathers and uncles and brothers to free the slaves. Maybe they're owed reparations by Oprah Winfrey. And by Barack Obama, for that matter. And I'll ask you, should black people in America be paid reparations? That's a huge topic. It's very important. I think the best thing to do is play the voice of the reptile from the United Nations. Her name is Muriel Fanon Mendez, the chairwoman of a United Nations working group for people of African descent. This is classic Pol Pot communism to drive a wedge between the races, cause a race war. But listen to her. This is what goes on at the UN. Hear it.
Contemporary police killings and the trauma it creates are reminiscent of the racial terror lynching of the past. Impunity for state violence has resulted in the current human rights crisis and must be addressed as a matter of urgency. Racial bias and disparities in the criminal justice system, mass incarceration, and the thought on crimes policy has disproportionately impacted African Americans. Mandatory minimum sentencing, disproportionate punishment of African Americans, including the death penalty, are of grave concern.
So this Nazi, this French Nazi, she's probably a combination of a Nazi and a communist all in one. She sounds like Madame Defarge. If there was an actual Madame Defarge from the Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, I would cast her voice. Her voice alone makes you want to strangle her to death. Nobody would do that, of course. But the voice, that slimy French voice. But she says we owe African Americans because of all these things. State violence. Disparities in the criminal justice system, which is a total crock of garbage. Mass incarceration. You mean they put people in jail who didn't commit a crime? When did that happen? Tough on crime policies? That seems to keep criminals from committing their crimes, moron. Is disproportionately impacted African Americans? Why? Because apparently there's a disproportionate amount of crime being committed by that demographic group. What are you talking about, idiot? You know, this is the same garbage you see in a school with a teacher. Teachers are disproportionately picking on Latinos and Hispanic males. No, it's not because Hispanics and African males in classrooms tend to cause more trouble. No, it's because the evil racist teacher picks on them. See, this is the lie, the big lie. This is how the scum left works. So, my friends, the disproportionate use of the death penalty is another one she's citing, which is utter rubbish again. Because if you look back on the number of people who have been executed over the last number of years, it is not disproportionately African Americans who have been executed, by the way. So now let's go back to the slime bags at the United Nations, the evil slime communists, and I've said before, and I'll go on the record again, I've been on the record for 20 years, I have no power whatsoever. All I have is opinion. All I have is the power of opinion. That's all I have. If it was up to me, and it isn't, I would immediately shut down the United Nations. I would deport everybody in the UN back to their home. I'd give them 48 hours to get out of New York City. And I would turn the whole UN building on UN Plaza into a homeless shelter. And I'll tell you what, I'll split the baby with the bathwater. A homeless shelter only for African-American homeless. That's all. How's that? Does that work, Robert? Because I don't want to be disproportionately unfair. Throw everyone out of the UN, send them back where they came from, with their prostitutes and their drugs, and then open the UN up as a homeless shelter for people of color. Americans only. That's all. Would that work for you? Yeah, right. That's going to happen. So, yeah, once again, the reparations for slavery in the U.S. is in the news. Now I'll hear all the big-mouth liberals from New York. Yeah, we owe them reparations. All the Murrays running around the Bronx. Yeah, we owe them reparations because we've been bad. So, Murray, why don't you give up a dime of your pocket? Murray, give up your house, Murray. Murray, give up your condominium in Palm Beach, Murray. Murray, give a pair of shoes. But Murray isn't going to give up a pair of shoes. Murray won't put a nickel into the reparations. He wants you to pay for it. So, no, I'll talk about this. I'm not afraid to talk about it because I'm on the right side of history here. So let's talk about slavery in a macro sense. Can you name one nation in this world that has never had a people enslaved by another? Name one. We all know the Egyptians used Jewish slaves to build the pyramids. So that means what? I should hate Egyptians? I don't hate Egyptians. I never met an Egyptian I liked. Or didn't like, actually. I used the Lenny Bruce line. I never met an Egyptian I didn't like. Because I never met an Egyptian that I know of. I did meet Egyptians. In fact, some of them, I do know them very well. I can name one. I know one Egyptian. How do you know if someone's an Egyptian? They look like they're from the ancient world, like Mesopotamia, like they brewed beer in like 400. No, you can't name a nation that didn't enslave someone. Now, number two, did you know that the Mayans had slaves? Oh, yeah! Your poor oppressed Latinos of Mayan descent, their great-grandfathers or great-great-great-grandfathers kept slaves. Go watch one of the greatest films ever done in history by Mel Gibson, one of America's and the world's greatest filmmakers in the world, ever. That Apocalypto was the most astonishing movie I'd ever seen. Yeah, you'll see about slavery. That's the Mayans doing it to each other. Did you know Arabs had slaves? Oh, yes. Did you know Africans, since we're talking about the sensitive topic of Africans, did you know that in Africa, Africans enslaved other Africans? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If they found a weaker tribe, they put a hook in them and they made them into a slave. The Mongols took slaves. The early Europeans enslaved other Europeans. The American Indians enslaved other Indians that they captured. It's horrible. It's horrible. In the 20th century, the Japanese took slaves from China, Korea, and Mongolia until World War II ended those atrocities. Do you know what the Japanese did to the Koreans? Do you know what the Japanese did at Nanking, China? Do you know what the Japanese did to the Mongolians? Do you have any idea? Well, it's over. No one in China is demanding reparations from the Japanese. No one in Korea is demanding reparations from the Japanese, are they? Now, there is not a piece of land on this planet that is now a country that was the result of some sort of invasion, not a piece of land that was not some sort of invasion or conquest responsible for the creation of that land. And let me tell you something else. Slavery exists on the planet right now. This is the part that eats me alive. As we are talking esoterically about the injustice of slavery, and believe me, it's about as worse you can do to anybody is enslave them. It's nothing worse. Nothing. It scars people for many generations. Just take a look at what's going on in this country. People still walking around with resentment over something that didn't even happen to them. But let's put that aside. It's one of the worst things that could ever happen to anybody. There's no saying not. No question about it. However, I'm going to say this, and I hope you understand me. I know Jewish people, a lot of them, and I've run away from this type of Jew. The liberal Jews walk around with a chip on their shoulder about the Holocaust. And let me tell you why it's a mistake. The Holocaust in World War II was one of the most horrendous things ever done to other human beings. It was not just slavery, but it was torture and then murder and then the gassing of millions. How much worse can it get than that? It can't, right? But the Holocaust committed against, by the way, the Holocaust means fire, by fire. That's all it means. The Holocaust against the Jews, which was basically a burning of the Jewish people by the German Nazis in World War II, was horrendous, no question about it. But Jews should not define themselves by this event, this horrible event. Because by doing so, what you do is you're scarring yourself. You're ruining your whole mind. Judaism is not about the Holocaust. You shouldn't forget it. But Judaism is not about the Holocaust. It's about the Torah. It's about the Word of God. And when the Jew forgets that it's about the Word of God, he ceases to be a full Jew. He becomes a victim that marches around New York with an attitude a mile high. You get it? Take a look at Hillary's encampment. You'll find out what I'm talking about. Now, I played for you the voice of a snake from the UN. Her name was Mireille Fanon-Mendez, France, calling for reparations for slavery by Americans for blacks. And I've addressed it in the opening of this show. Every instinct in me said this is classic Marxism, classic communism. She's trying to start a race war. This is what they do. This is how they operate. I looked her up because I had never heard of her. And sure enough, take a guess who she is. She's the daughter of one of the worst people in the history of the world, the Marxist so-called intellectual Frantz Fanon. So she's a hater. And let me explain something to you. The French Marxists are the most virulent, vicious in the world. France is a hotbed of insanity to begin with, on almost every level. But the insanity of Marxism, the locus of it, the locus of this infection is probably Paris, which is, by the way, why they're invaded by Islamists, because of the left wing in that country opened their borders up. Put that aside for the moment. Anyone listening to this show who's read Scorched Earth and can instantly tell me who is it that I quote or explain to you was a kindly constitutional scholar who was a leader of a people in Asia, went to France, studied Marxism, and came back and introduced what he had learned in France and created the Khmer Rouge which resulted in a mountain of skulls, 3 million fellow Cambodians killed after a number of years. You don't have to look it up. It's in scorched earth. His name is Pol Pot. So this insanity, this hatred, which will lead to civil war and death, is being repeated again. Only it's not only coming from the UN, it's coming from the White House. Be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com.
So this is it's a dangerous precedent, and it's an example of why sometimes you have to do what's hard. And frankly, I wish Congress here had done what's hard. I didn't expect it, because voting, if you're perceived as voting against 9/11 families right before an election, not surprisingly, that's a hard vote for people to take. But it would have been the right thing to do. I'm concerned.
With his pants down. Okay, he's giving a big speech today about the whole Congress standing up to him finally in his last months. You know, the last reign of this guy. You hear how he sounds? Now, this is even more, what's about to tell you now, I almost got tongue-tied. I'm so upset. You know what I think of the head of DHS. You know that he's the most incompetent possible person to ever have this job. If you took an ordinary beat cop from any city in America and put him in charge of this job, and he had done 1/10 of what this man has allowed to happen, the guy would be in prison for incompetence. He's a former Wall Street lawyer, a lobbyist, Jay Johnson. No one knows where he came from. He just gave a speech saying, get ready for more terror attacks. Johnson said, expectation of next terror attack keeps me up at night. Are you listening to this? What did I say to you? Department of Homeland Security head Jay Johnson informed Americans today that the country is likely to suffer more domestic terror attacks. Johnson was speaking at the Atlantic Magazine Ideas Forum, and he admitted that DHS sees a range of threats in the homeland, but, quote, can't say everything is a priority. Well, no, his number one priority is, making sure that transgenders get jobs in DHS, make sure that the workplace is safe, a safe space, that there's no white privilege, that people are studying things like that. The top Homeland Security official also lamented the American press only covers bad news, and that the good news in Homeland Security is often no news. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean the good news? What good news is there? We just had another terror attack in Seattle, Mr. Johnson, and you did nothing. You did nothing. You didn't stop it. We only learned today that the guy who committed that massacre at the gay nightclub, which you said, and your cohorts of the FBI said was as a result of a lone wolf, was a complete and total lie. You were caught with your pants down in the outhouse, because the transcripts were finally released by the local police just today. And Mateen, who conducted that massacre in the Orlando nightclub, did not do it because he was anti-gay. He said he did it because of a drone strike on one of his ISIS cohorts in the Middle East. He was not a lone wolf. He was an ISIS member, right under your nose. You were busy lecturing America about fairness and diversity and trans rights. That's what goes on. And it goes back to the opening line of Scorched Earth. Roman civilization did not pass peacefully away. It was assassinated. So it doesn't matter whether Obama or Jay Johnson is purposely assassinating this nation. All that matters is that through their cockamamie, upside-down priorities, they are assassinating this country on every level. And we have great challenges. We have great internal enemies. We have people who are purposely dividing us and purposely harming us, and people who are, let us say, not purposely doing either, but doing it nevertheless. There are dangerous, subversive organizations in the United States who, in fact, are purposely harming us, and I list them all in Scorched Earth. That's why it's still a bestseller. Some books come and go. This one is not going so fast. So now we have Jay Johnson saying we're going to get more terror attacks. This comes after Seattle. This comes after every Muslim attack you can imagine. And he doesn't know what to do about it. Whether it's San Bernardino or Orlando, he says he can't stop it. He said, we don't know. We have no way to stop it. Of course he does. I'll tell you how to do it. Put me in charge of it. It's real simple. It's commonsensical. It's what Sarkozy wants to do in France, which is preventively arrest and detain in camps all those on terror watch lists. It's real simple. If you have child molesters running around in a city and you don't want a child to be molested or raped, what you do is, if there's an epidemic of child rape in a city, what you got to do is preventively detain those people on that watch list. until such time as you deem it safe enough to release them after their sentencing. But in a time of terror like this, I am sorry. We have to stop being little children working inside a university with all of our concern about everybody's rights, because people are dying, Johnson. People are dying. They're going to suffer the rest of their lives, all because of your stupid leftist philosophy. So he's telling you, get prepared for more Seattles, more Orlandos, and more terror attacks. He can't stop it. But give him another $1 trillion and he'll lecture you on why he should have another $1 trillion. You understand now what I mean by scorched earth restoring America after Obama? She'll make it worse.